The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of our guests and panel members and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution any member of the Nova Society is associated with. The material information presented on the Nova Society is for general information purposes only. Reproduction or dissemination for the purpose other than education is prohibited without express written consent of the Nova Society. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today we will continue to answer some questions from listeners. This time, the majority of the questions that came in are in regards to last week's debate between President Biden and former President Trump, the poor showing by President Biden, and the listener is asking, can President Biden possibly be able to recover from his bad performance? And if not, should the Democrats decide on a different candidate moving forward? So we'll take up that discussion, so let's listen in. So Brooke, I sent you some stuff.
You did. Our mailbag.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And I will say this, I did watch it before I came on.
Really?
I did.
You did.
I think if I had not watched that debate, I would just be a happier person overall.
Well, I was going to be, except I had to send the questions to Brooke, and it was like, well, maybe I really ought to watch it. No, it was like, Did you go to the party, Scott?
No, I did not.
Oh, you
No, and I'll tell you why. It was a beautiful day. I wanted to go to the beach, which I did. And then I came back, and there was a concert that was going from 7 o'clock, and they actually were ending the concert at 8:45 so everybody could get home to watch the debate. And
right.
It's a free concert in the park every Tuesday and Thursday here. And I was so glad that I went because this band was really a lot of fun. Nashville-based group called Nefesh Mountain that plays bluegrass music with a sort of Jewish tinge to it.
Nice.
And she told the story about how she went back to Ukraine to see where her people are from, to try to find her great-grandmother's grave or something like that, and was disturbed to find nothing left of the town or the cemetery, just a forest where it had been. And the Nazis had wiped out the entire place when they got there in 1941 or 2.
Wow.
So, all right, Brooke. What do you got for us?
We've got quite a number of questions from our listeners. We really have a lot of questions. So people our first listener here was saying that Biden was just terrible and looking old and looking senile, and the questions. 2 questions from this first listener is should the Democrats replace him, and if the Democrats ought to replace him, with whom? Which of you would care to take that one first?
So what do you think, Scott? I know what I think.
Well, yeah, go ahead, man.
Well, yeah, time to give up the ghost. We've said all along, the man deserves a second opportunity to run because he has done a good job. But the public perception that's going to come out of that debate is going to be horrendous for the Democratic Party. And it really is perceptions. People do not understand that, when you're the chief executive of anything, the first thing, if you're going to be successful and any good at it, is you hire people that are smarter than you to run everything. You're kind of the figurehead. You're the leader, but a leader is not a doer. And that's why he has people like Buttigieg. And that's why he has the people, Merrick Garland. That's why he has these people in those positions. And compared to the people that Trump would put in there, the Steve Millers and the Steve Bannons and General Flynn and all these, there's a huge disparity there. Neither one of them, I don't think, performed well, first of all. But I think Biden basically did solidify the fact that he's too old. And if the Democrats are going to do anything, they have to do something now. They cannot wait. And somebody's got to have a come to Jesus meeting with Joe and say, Joe, whether we like it or not, perceptions of what the public thinks, regardless of whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent, it truly does matter.
Okay. I'm gonna go with this. Pretty much everything that we saw last night in the debate was stuff we already knew. And the difference is that we knew that Joe Biden is old, frail, doesn't have the same sharp mental acuity that he arguably always had. I was never terribly impressed with Biden's when he was in the Senate. His sort of smarts, he was a glad-handing politician, but he never struck me as one of the, the really smart people in the Senate. He was good at getting things done because he was willing to work with other people, but not the sharpest knife in the drawer. What we saw last night, confirmed that, right? And his job was to combat it, and he didn't do that. And he came out on stage, and his facial color was the same color as his hair, basically. Like nobody put a little makeup on him. He looked pale and washed out. He fumbled everything that they gave him. He could not. They ask him a question about abortion, he answers one on immigration, or somehow got there. I mean, it was an awful performance, worse than Admiral Stockdale, who began his debate with "Who am I and why am I here?" I mean, this was worse than that. On the other side, we confirmed everything that we knew about Trump. He lied about everything, and he boasts about things that he doesn't deserve to boast about. The headline from this debate should be that Trump talked to Putin before the Ukraine invasion. Trump bragged at one point that Putin was not going to invade Ukraine during his administration, but he did this time. I want to try to get the exact quote, if I might, because it was really quite a confession. He said, after Putin saw Afghanistan, the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, when Putin saw that, he said, "You know what? I think we're going to go in and maybe take and he stops. This was his dream. I talked to him about it. His dream." Now that's Trump running at the mouth. Something else that we knew might happen, could happen, does happen. Trump runs off at the mouth, and he can't prevent himself from saying things that he shouldn't say. But if this could be looked into, I talked to him about it before the invasion of Ukraine, that is huge news and incredibly disturbing about Trump and his ongoing relationship with Vladimir Putin. That should concern every American a lot more than the pasty face of Joe Biden. I'll say one last thing since nobody else is talking. The last thing I'll say is that Trump supporters are gleeful today, which I find galling and unimaginable, because all they did was see their guy ripping one lie after another, telling that startling truth, and then all of this bragging and crazy talk, and they loved every second of it. Everything that Trump said yesterday has been said a million times on Fox. The fact that it's a bunch of lies is just not material to these people who do not live in reality. And the fact that they're happy today and we're so glum about the Democratic candidate is galling to me.
Yes, Scott. I mean, I don't know how to follow up on something like that, where that point that you made, if that's something that should really be brought to the attention of ProPublica or
The CIA. I mean, I'm sure they're listening in on
I don't
conversations.
know. No, seriously. I was listening and just in horror last night, and I noticed Biden's color as well, and I thought about the makeup, and it was oh, and no, what I was going to say was that Trump failed to answer really any question. It was always going back to something else, and it was, well, and so if
Well, can I address that? Because that's,
replace,
Brooke, that's good debating technique, I think. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
just answer it.
Never, you know, I remember, I think it was Henry Kissinger who once started a news conference by saying, "Okay, what questions do you have for my answers?" Because the answer is going to be what you want it to be. And there's a little technique to that, and I've done plenty of media training for executives, and you know, you sort of acknowledge the question, you find a way to bridge to your message, and then you tell your message. And that's what Trump did. He ignored the questions, basically. He didn't really even acknowledge them a lot of times, but he found a way to bridge into what he wanted to talk about, and he got his messages out there, for better or worse. You know, none of them are contain an iota of truth, but it is what he wanted to say. So I didn't have a problem with that. I had a little bit more problem. I don't know if you guys did, with the utter lack of fact checking, but on the part of the two moderators. I know they said that they weren't going to do that going in. But I didn't realize to this extent that they weren't going to say, "Hey, wait a minute, what the hell are you talking about? That's just crazy talk," and they didn't do that.
Well, I will say to that, number one, if you watch a debate and hope to see substance, good luck to you, because you're not going to see substance. I mean, you're not going to hear policy. You're going to hear generalities. And again, like Scott said, you're going to hear the message that the candidate wants to put out there to their base. And, you know, again, Trump's base are the cult that believes everything that comes out of his mouth. And in defense of Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, fact checking would have been nice on our end, you know, because we like facts. Facts are kind of like important. But if they had done that, Biden would not have even been in that debate. I mean, there'd been no need to even talk to him, because that would have been the back and forth. And that's all the back and forth would have been. And at the same time, I think that would have supported that Trump base's ideology that, well, CNN and every other network other than Fox, OAN, and Newsmax is against Trump. And I think that actually feeds. I think for Trump, he probably wanted that, so that he could basically stand there and say, well, you know, you're fake news. You're an awful person, like he said to poor Caitlin Collins. You know, that would have played into, you know, his strategy in my mind.
Yeah, possibly. Still, I mean, the passivity there was just off the charts.
It was.
I was not sure what the reasoning was really behind saying to him, well, the question was, after he had already meandered way off, to give him another opportunity to answer the question that he clearly wasn't going to answer. I don't know if I would have done that. It was, I don't know. To me, I thought that was, I don't know, using more time for him, that was going to be misused. So, Scott, am I correct then that you feel that President Biden should be replaced by the Democrats with someone else?
So I'm of two minds on this, right? Well, one of them is that I'll forget about this just as quickly as Trump supporters will forget about 34 convictions. We'll forget about January 6th. We'll forget, I can move on from it. I think it'd be nice if Joe could get out there and make some speeches and do some things to kind of put this in the rearview mirror, and we'll forget about it. But I don't think he convinced the American public that he's up for the job. And that was his job last night, and he failed at it. And there's no reason to try to soft soap that. That's what it is. I mean, he had that job and he failed, and it's not obviously up to me. If it had been, he wouldn't be here, from the get-go, right? He would have gracefully bowed out and allowed the primary process to happen and Democratic voters to choose another candidate. That's what we were all hoping for. Obviously, that didn't happen. A few months ago, I brought up the scenario that once he gets all the delegates, he can be the kingmaker and decide who he's going to give those delegates to. I don't think Kamala Harris polls very well, so I don't think that she would be the right person for him to do that with. It was hard not to notice that Gavin Newsom was there last night. And I'm guessing that he was there for, to get a sense of what's going on in this race and to be ready possibly to be that guy who gets those delegates. And it does deny Democratic voters, the process. But if Biden was going to be graceful and bow out, and hopefully sooner rather than later, and with whatever cover he needs to save face, I guess Newsom is as good a person as any to get those delegates. You're letting your imagination run.
I was letting my imagination run.
Mark, it's Joe Biden. I need you to step in for me.
Yeah, no, I always keep thinking what a shame about former Governor Cuomo of New York, when he was so popular and stuff during COVID, and then he wound up making a mess and having to step down. He might have been a good possible replacement.
I think there's a deep bench. There's plenty of governors. There's plenty of people in the administration. I don't know if you saw yesterday, I believe it was, or 2 days ago, Pete Buttigieg putting Scott Perry in his place about EVs. I mean, there's a guy who always has the right thing to say and would never fail at a debate to say things that would kind of make you go, wow, that guy's really smart. So,
yeah, he's a Rhodes Scholar. I thought, boy, I'd vote for him for president, and without without thinking twice about it. And he's a brilliant man. Wow.
Well, his time's probably going to be 2028. That's probably what he's looking at now. About Biden, and again, Scott and I have said so many times, so over the last couple of years we've been doing this. Would we rather somebody else? Abso-doggone-lutely. But this is what you've got. And I think about, Biden's been in for 4 years almost. And I look at Barack Obama when he first took office, young man, full of all sorts of energy. Now he's still full of energy, but when he after that 8 years, he looked 15 years older. And I'm sorry, but yeah, when you're in your 80s, that's going to even play even heavier on you. Every single president that during the time where, pictures and, that technology was there to actually see them, every single time when you look at them, they age 10 years for every 4 years they're in office. And when you're in your...
Bush did, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I didn't think Trump aged.
Huh?
Did he? I didn't think, sorry to cut you off. It didn't seem to me that Trump aged at all. He's the only one I noticed who didn't seem to age. Everybody else aged tremendously.
Well, when you got a Hollywood makeup thing going at you, I mean, you can, but that's usually not what presidents do. I mean, Bill Clinton, he aged. Jimmy Carter, I mean, all of them start out with, like brown hair or whatever. And by the time it's over and done with, it's like, gone. Biden, again, when you're 80 years old, it's going to take its toll. I agree with Scott that there are plenty of governors. Gretchen Whitmer comes to mind. Gavin Newsom comes to mind. The only problem with Gavin Newsom is he's going to have to do an awful lot of explaining about the situation in California. And because there's a perception of what's going on in California, whether it's true or not, I guess you'd have to ask somebody from California whether or not it is. But the fact is that there are people. I also agree with Scott that it would take away the democratic process. However, I don't think the Democratic Party would care about that right now. Their greater fear is Trump getting into a second term. That is their greater fear than. And again, we've had presidents in the past, sitting presidents, who did not get nominated by their party. This is not unusual. This is not an unusual thing. So it could happen. But I would say, yeah, he probably after this, I don't know if he can recover from this. I'm not sure he can recover from it. I did see they put on a thing on the news where he was speaking to a live audience directly afterwards, and it was totally different. I mean, he was totally different. Seemed a lot more energetic and all that. Maybe just being next to Trump just kind of drains the life out of you. I don't know. But yeah, he probably should, and as Scott said, sooner than later, do it now. Kamala Harris, no. I don't think Kamala Harris has got it. I would say somebody like a Gretchen Whitmer or a Gavin Newsom would be.
There's a whole bunch. Josh,
there are more than that, sure, of course.
JD
But I mean, we're talking
Pritzker.
about people that are really known. I mean, really, how the people have that name recognition.
I mean, how you explain that to Kamala Harris? Like that's got to be a tough conversation to have. Now, what they could do is they could send her out more, and somebody had mentioned this on TV. I forget what station it was last night. That it was kind of political malpractice for Biden, who had spent 8 years as a vice president himself, not to promote her. And somebody had this wild comeback on it. I guess it was probably Scott Jennings on CNN, who said that she was in charge of the border, which is ridiculous. Right. But that's like a typical Fox News lie that won't go away. Like somehow she was the border. She was in charge of the border, and she was and everything that bad that's happening at the border is her fault. She was not. She was in charge of going to the three countries that most of the immigrants were coming from in Central America, and convincing them to try something else so that they could curtail illegal immigration from those three countries. She did a good job with that. They continued to press this idea that she was somehow in charge of immigration in America, and she was a big failure for it. Whatever it is, as we know, perception means a lot more. She's not popular. There's something about her that riles people up, whether it's the way she laughs or her sound of her voice or whatever. This country's, still, I think, far away from being ready to have a female president. Just females seem to grate on voters of both genders. So I don't know. That's a tough conversation to have. Obviously, our position all along has been we wished he would have not run. I'll stand by that. He should probably not run. He really doesn't seem like he's up for the job. And that's the perception that he was supposed to get rid of last night, and he failed to do that. So, hey, failure has prices. And, unless he figures out some way to go out there and really hit the ball out of the park somewhere, I don't see this lasting. I think somebody else will have to step in. They should be able to get their own vice president. And I don't know how. I mean, it's a mess, obviously. It's a mess of his own making.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsors for this episode. BH Conflict Resolution Services, a full-service dispute resolution firm offering expert and cost-effective mediation services to couples, groups, and businesses. BHCRS can be reached at www.bhcrs.com. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms. We'd like to thank all of our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershworth, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.